from championship.
Stepping back, loads up, looks long, throws, end zone, touchdown! Alabama! Devontae Smith! The kick is up, the kick is good! Auburn wins! 22-19!
Two legendary plays.
He's gonna win the football game! Auburn's gonna win the football game! He ran the missed field goal back! He ran it back 109 yards! They're not gonna keep him off the field tonight! From the 25 of Auburn, here's the give Henry, near side, big hole, open, he's gonna go! Touchdown! Alabama! Eli, Alabama's gonna win the football game!
Covering the best rivalry in college football. This is the Iron Bowl Hour.
And we are back yet again on the Iron Bowl Hour. We've only been gone away for a minute, but a lot has happened since we've been gone. Even though we've only been gone for a day or two, the SEC 2020 schedule has come out. A few other things have happened. Auburn had a scrimmage. So a lot to get into, and we're going to keep the train rolling on our previews. We got LSU to talk about this week. That should be fun to get into. LSU obviously going to have a very good team this year, and we'll get into some Auburn Ole Miss as well. But Zach, welcome back into the show. We got some scrimmage action going down on Auburn's end. I'm excited to talk about that, and 2020 schedule. A lot of people fired up about that. So let's get into it, shall we?
Let's go. We're another step closer.
Another step closer. That is right. All right, Zach, I'm going to throw it to you. I'm going to let you kick off the news here. What do you have for us news this week?
Not much has happened the last couple days, other than the big 2020 schedule release. DJ Dale has recently been reported that he's non-contact. He's expected to be a starter. He's a true freshman, but he's non-contact, not participating in practice. We won't know anything about that until Saban talks to the media on Saturday. Other than that, not a ton has changed. No other big news from the injury front, at least as far as Alabama is concerned.
All right. Well, man, you just got to keep an eye on those injuries as we get closer and closer. It becomes a bigger deal as we get closer and closer. More injuries happen. So we'll keep an eye on all those going forward. Speaking of injuries, though, it did come out that Oregon's one of their receivers, Brendan Schooler, I believe is how you pronounce his name, he went down with a foot injury, a serious foot injury, and he's going to be out for 6 to 8 weeks. So he will definitely be out for that opener. Unfortunate news. You obviously hate to hear it, even though it's an opponent of Auburn's. You hate to hear it. And Oregon, they're not very deep at receiver right now. They had their leading receiver leave, I believe, and only two other receivers than Schooler who have caught a pass, multiple passes from Justin Herbert are on the team. So that definitely is going to sting for them a little bit. Not the biggest loss in the world, but still a significant one nonetheless.
Did you see how they reported that initially on Twitter, what they called him?
I did not, no.
They used instead of saying receiver, they called him a flanker. And I was like, what is this, like 1977?
Yeah, that's not a term you hear thrown around very often.
Hey, what are they running, the wing tee?
Yeah, that's an interesting choice of words there from the reporter. Some more news, though. Auburn did have their first fall scrimmage. I'll talk about that briefly before we get into some preview stuff. Not a great day for the offense. The scrimmage went down today on Thursday. The defense absolutely dominated this scrimmage from what Gus Malzahn told reporters afterwards. The first-team defense got 3 turnovers, 2 interceptions, and a fumble. So he really said he didn't see much from the quarterbacks because they really couldn't put a drive together. There was very few first downs had by any of the offenses. I believe 1 touchdown was scored, and that was about it. So tough day for the offense. Not much news-wise there on the quarterback battle. It's going to take a lot more snaps and reps for these quarterbacks to separate themselves from each other. So we'll keep an eye on that. More scrimmages to come. Hopefully the offense can kind of start getting things together. Obviously Auburn's defense is great, so it's going to be tough for the offense to score points against them. But you hope one of these quarterbacks kind of catch their stride and proved to be the for sure starter. So we'll see how that goes. Other than that, Anders Carlson hit a 58-yard field goal. I thought that was great to hear. I mean, that's a massive field goal. He's got a big leg. Hopefully he'll be a little bit more consistent this year. But good to hear he hit that 58-yarder and also hit a 47-yarder, I believe it was, under pressure to keep the team from doing up downs, which is I'm sure the team was very glad he made that. But yeah, that's kind of the story. The defense dominated and the offense struggled. That's pretty much all we got out of that scrimmage.
Yeah, usually in those scrimmages you see the defense way ahead, so that's really not surprising.
Right. Yeah, it's not surprising, but you want one of these quarterbacks to take charge and kind of show out a little bit.
Yeah, I do have a clip from Arizona. If you want to hear that, I can play that real quick. This is him right after the scrimmage walking off the field.
The quarterback's obviously not grading them, but what did you see out of them as far as leading the team, the things you wanted to see?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the Orange Group, there weren't enough first downs to even see it, So that's credit to the defense. But at the same time, man, we got to be better. We got to be better. Offensively, got to be better really as a whole. That's really what stood out to me, not just one group. We just they didn't move the ball very well.
Was it a function of the offensive line not getting the kind of
No. It's a function of everybody. It wasn't offensive line. Offensive line last year, they took their lumps and all that. And I'm going to tell you right now, I really feel strong. Our offensive line this year will be very solid and have a chance to be really good. So it's just a matter of there was a lot of different moving parts out there. And the thing about it, when you play good defense, all 11 guys got to be on the same page and they got to be doing the right thing and everything has to be clean. And most plays, all 11 wasn't clean. It may have been 9 and 2 not and 10 and 1. But when you're playing a good defense, it's got to be 11. But the good thing from our standpoint is, as coaches, we're going to be able to go in that film room, get everybody in a room, and see why a play worked or didn't work. And the key is the good offenses come back the next time they respond and they get it corrected.
Yeah, so there you hear from Gus and Zach. I mean, you're right. In these scrimmages early in the season in fall camp, the defense does typically dominate those, and you add that with Auburn having one of the best defenses in the country. Definitely not surprising that the offense struggled, but hopefully as they go forward and the young quarterbacks get some more experience, we'll see some more points scored in these scrimmages and the offense finding more success.
Yeah, and also tonight, of course, I think last year Kobe Bryant was one of the big name speakers Alabama had in fall camp. Tonight they had this guy.
Roll Tide. We had a good conversation with the kids. It was really awesome. Roll Tide.
So they had Mike Tyson in to talk to the team. Not sure what kind of angle he took as far as a motivational message, but Nick Saban always seems to get some big name athletes in there to speak to the team on a yearly basis. So that's pretty neat.
Yeah, I thought that was cool to see. I love Mike Tyson, man. I don't know if you've heard many of his speeches or interviews or anything like that, but I could definitely see them bringing him in and him firing teams up and motivating them and that kind of thing. He's really a great speaker and super interesting. There was a show a while back called Being Mike Tyson. I believe it was on Fox Sports 1. They kind of followed him around and interviewed him and explored his life a little bit, and super interesting guy. Obviously one of the best boxers of all time. Big fan of Mike Tyson. It was cool to see that they brought him in. Nick Saban, man, he knows how to bring in the big guns. I'm a little bit jealous, to be honest, because that's pretty neat.
Yeah, I'm sure that it's pretty cool for the players too.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine being a 19, 20-year-old kid and you get these legends like Kobe Bryant and Mike Tyson coming in who are, I mean, not only like generational people, but I mean, they're some of the best of all time. So super cool for these kids to experience that, definitely. All right, Zach, you mentioned earlier the 2020 schedule came out. We'll go over that briefly and then we'll dive into it a little bit later. But on that 2020 schedule for the SEC teams, came out that Georgia and Auburn are going to be playing in October instead of November, which, Zach, you want to guess the last time that they've played in October instead of November? Just throw a guess out on the year.
I think I heard it. I think it was like 1940-something or something.
Yeah, 1936. That is absolutely insane. So it'll be different for sure. We'll see how that goes. They're playing LSU the week before Alabama now. Auburn and Alabama both having an SEC West opponent the week prior to the Iron Bowl now. So we'll see how that goes. We'll get into that a little bit later, but I thought we should just mention that off the top. All right, Zach, you want to talk about LSU now?
Let's do it.
All right, let's get into it. So LSU, man, they're going to be insane this year. Obviously, they're bringing Joe Burrow back. Had a pretty decent year for them last year. Kind of the first time in a while where I've looked at LSU and been like, man, they might have a quarterback over there. Wasn't just lighting the world on fire, but he had a really decent year, showed a lot of talent. I think if he takes the next step this year, he could be really good. He needs to be a little bit more efficient. Kind of wasn't the most efficient quarterback last year, but he can run the ball, he can throw the ball, he's got a good arm, and can really be dangerous for this offense. They lost their leading running back, Nick Brissett, but they shouldn't be missing a beat there. They got Clyde Edwards-Helaire coming back, should be really good for them, and they also have a freshman coming in, John Emery Jr., who was, I believe, the number 2 running back in the country out of college. So he's looking to come in and impress some people as well. So they should be fine at running back, as LSU normally is, and they also have Leonard Fournette, not to be confused with Leonard Fournette, but they're going to be good at running back. And receiver as well. They're bringing back pretty much their entire receiving core, led by Justin Jefferson. Going to be really solid at receiver and returning a lot of experience on that offensive line as well. And as far as the defense goes, they're losing really 2 of the best defensive players in the country from last year, in Devin White and Greedy Williams, who I believe both went in the first round of the NFL draft. But, man, they are still stacked on defense. LSU kind of just reloads at this point, a lot like Alabama does. The defense is going to look really good. Got Rashard Lawrence, Michael Divinity Jr., and Grant Delpit, who we were talking about before the show, who's going to be one of the best players in the country. Really, really great safety for them. Led the team in sacks last year as a safety, really all over the field, as you were saying earlier. So their defense is going to be insane this year. And they lost Devin White, but Jacob Phillips is going to be returning at middle linebacker, who was their second leading tackler last year, so shouldn't be too much of a drop-off there for them losing Devin White. But, man, LSU is going to be really, really good this year. Should be one of the top teams in the country. Zach, I just kind of gave a rundown there of everything position-wise for them. What jumps off the page for you when it comes to LSU? What worries you most?
I think they might have the best secondary we've seen in probably 7 or 8 years at LSU. I mean, this defense has the potential, if they can stay healthy, to rival the 2011 defense, I think. You just got talent not only in the secondary but at other parts of the field too. You are losing Devin White, but Michael Divinity is a really good linebacker. A lot of people say Christian Fulton was a better corner last year, even than Greedy Williams was. So I feel pretty good about him. And like you said, Grant Delpit, it'd be very hard to argue he's not the best player in all of college football. Just how versatile he is. The way he comes up, can play the run, can rush the passer, he can play all over the field. And a lot of their defensive linemen, he's up 5 yards from the line of scrimmage. And just the versatility he offers, along with Kaylavon Chason, who got hurt last year. He could be an excellent pass rusher. He's an outside linebacker, but he can really rush the passer. He can cover receivers. He'd be another guy that could be really big for that defense with his versatility as well. Really like the way he looked against Miami last year before he got hurt. He's more of a slender build. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Tim Williams at Alabama a few years ago. But he can really get at the quarterback and still has that athleticism to cover receivers. I'm just kind of excited to see what LSU's defense could become.
Yeah, and Zach, I wanted to ask you too, out of the 3, Auburn, Alabama, and LSU, do you think LSU has the best defense out of the 3? Because those are 3 really good defenses there. And do you think LSU is the best defense in the country in 2019?
You're splitting hairs. LSU's might be the most I don't know. They can do more things really well. I think there's no doubt Auburn has the best defensive line. Their defensive line is better than LSU's. But as a whole, I probably like LSU's defense better than Alabama's and Auburn's overall, just from kind of what they have. But they got to stay healthy. Chase On only played one game last year. He's got to be able to stay on the field. But man, these other guys like Grant Delpit and just that secondary, some of those guys that played last year that weren't necessarily starters that are coming back and have some experience. Just all the versatility they're going to have just in the secondary is going to be really impressive. And we know the way that college football is played in 2019. You need that in the secondary because most of the time you're not going to be in your base defense. You're going to be in either nickel or dime anyway. So,
yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. I think as a whole, you're right. Top to bottom, they probably do have the best defense in the SEC and probably in the country as well. Auburn probably edges them out on the defensive line. Obviously, well documented how good their defensive line is. LSU's no slouch either, though. So they're going to be really, really fun to watch on defense, as LSU almost always is, just stacked top to bottom. But let's talk about the offense a little bit. We saw Joe Burrow come on last year, find some success for this offense. Kind of took charge of the offense, and like I said, it was the first time in a long time where I've thought LSU had a talented quarterback who could really lead their offense. So were you impressed with Joe Burrow last year, and do you think he's going to be really dangerous this year and be able to be in the upper echelon of SEC quarterbacks this year?
I think he could be. Probably the most impressive thing about Joe Burrow last year was just his toughness, his willingness to run the ball up the middle, take big hits, and just keep on going. He really showed how tough he is, and I probably earned a lot of respect from his teammates because of that. He doesn't have the biggest arm in the world, but he can make the throws he needs to make. He made a couple big throws in crucial situations last year. He can be kind of inconsistent at times, but I think he could be one of the top quarterbacks there behind Jake Fromm and the Tua Tagovailoas of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. I mean, I think with a full year under his belt as a starting quarterback at LSU, I think they're going to be able to run the read like they did last year. And I think his passing game is going to take a step forward, and I think he's really going to be right there underneath those guys that you just mentioned. So I think he can take this offense to new heights, and he's got the weapons around him too. They got a good offensive line. They got all the receivers back essentially from last year, got a great running game. So I really think this offense is going to be one to be reckoned with. And you pair that with this defense, and man, LSU is just going to be so tough to beat. Really kind of hard for me to picture how Auburn's going to get out of Baton Rouge with a win this year with just how talented this team is. I think, like you said, if LSU stays healthy, they're going to be tough to beat. It's hard to see them getting more than one or two losses with a team as talented as they have this year. So, Zach, with that being said, I'll throw it to you and ask, how many wins do you think they're going to get this year? Do you think I believe they went 10-3 with their bowl win last year against UCF. Do you think they're going to surpass that this year?
And the schedule's a little tougher. You have a road trip to Texas. But I think they will be better. So I think about 10 wins is probably where they'll end up, somewhere around there. And if Joe Burrow steps up his game and plays better than they did last year, I think they could push for 11 or more wins, depending on how things go, and as long as they don't have any crucial injuries occur. One thing that worries me about LSU, just from watching Alabama LSU last year, Alabama dominated them on the offensive and defensive line in that game, and there were times last year where they struggled. I think against Auburn, they went like max protect. They had like 7 or 8 guys on the line of scrimmage to help protect on pass plays and only sending out like 2 receivers or 1 receiver on a route, just to try to keep things in check. Don't think you can do that long term and have success. So offensive line play probably needs to improve. and they did lose a couple guys on the defensive line from last year. So that the guys up front, down in the trenches on defense, may be a little bit of a concern if they become vulnerable to stopping the run. That could be a concern. But I mean, every team has concerns though, so just kind of nitpicking at this point.
Yeah, very true. And I mean, not a lot of holes in this LSU team. They are very sound top to bottom. They do lose Cole Tracy, their kicker, who ended things for Auburn last year in that game at Auburn. So we'll see how the kicking game is for them. It could be a bit of a question mark. You never know with college kickers if a guy's going to come in and break records, or if he's going to come in and lose 3 or 4 close games for your team. So that could be something to watch out for. But Joe Burrow, I'm looking at the stats right here in front of me. He did struggle a little bit in the Auburn and Alabama games last year. Didn't have great completion percentages, and I believe he didn't have any touchdowns against Alabama and threw a pick, and had 1 touchdown and no picks in the Auburn game. He did make some big throws in that Auburn game. When it came crunch time, he stepped up in the pocket and threw some dimes to kind of put the dagger in Auburn last year. So it'll be interesting to see how he performs in those big games like that next season. So I'm really excited to watch LSU this year. Obviously one of Auburn and Alabama's biggest rivals, but they're going to be an insane team this year. It's going to be a dogfight in the SEC West, man, between those 3 teams, and you don't know what you're going to get out of Mississippi State and Texas A&M. But SEC West is going to be a dogfight this year, and it's going to be really, really interesting to see if somebody's able to overcome Bama this year, and who's going to come in second. And I don't know. I'm excited to see what happens in SEC West because I really just don't know.
Yeah, and I should mention I talked about concerns with injuries with LSU, and they've had a lot of guys missing practice this week. Caleb Von Chason, Christian Fulton, and Grant Delpit all missed practice yesterday. Apparently, Chason has some kind of issue going on separate from the knee issue he had last year. They've had 3 or 4 other reserve players that have missed practice as well, mostly in the secondary. So I think they only had 4 cornerbacks able to practice yesterday. So not what you want to see this early in fall camp. So hopefully those guys can get healthy and at least get healthy before the season starts here in a couple weeks.
Yeah, and I will say they're starting the season with Georgia Southern, which you look at it and you're like, it's Georgia Southern, nothing to be worried about there. But it is a triple option offense. I know those cause teams fit sometimes, and then they have Texas the week after that. So the first 2 weeks, I think we're going to find out a lot about LSU and see what they have, especially in that Texas game. That one's going to be really, really interesting to see what happens in that one. Obviously, I think LSU has a more talented and football sound team there, but it's going to be a fun one to watch. See what Sam Ehlinger has, and watch that quarterback battle between him and Joe Burrow. Should be a fun one, and LSU is going to be a really, really fun team to watch this year.
Yeah, and if you just look at Texas on the surface, too, they only have 2 returners back on defense. There's some big concerns about Texas's defense, so it'd be interesting to see how that goes. And then Georgia Southern, they are not what they used to be. They have not been a great team the last couple of years. They aren't what they were. I guess it's been 5 or 6 years ago now when they played Alabama. But even still, running that triple option, they're going to be throwing a lot of low blocks, a lot of diving at the knees, and that's not what you want for, especially a guy like Chason who just had a ACL tear last year. You don't want your linebackers being cut blocked for 3 hours. So a lot of potential for injury in that game. I'm sure the coaching staff at LSU is not looking forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a weird team to open the season with, and you say Georgia Southern not what they used to be, but they won 10 games last year. They're 2018 Camellia Bowl champs. So, just saying. They could pose a little bit of a threat to LSU. They at least could make things difficult for them and be a nuisance in that Week 1 game when they're trying to get ready for Texas. So.
Yeah, just the cut blocking. That would drive defenders crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Anything else you want to talk about LSU before we move on and cover Auburn Ole Miss real quick?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, that's it for LSU. But like I said, man, they're going to be a really, really good team. Going to be one of the tops in the country. Going to be fun to see what they do in 2019.
And Alabama's going for 9 in a row. So it's amazing
and
how fast that's happened.
That has happened really fast. They have dominated that series in recent memory, and we're not going to talk about recent memory with Auburn and LSU. All right, well, let's get into Auburn and Ole Miss here. Not a whole lot to talk about. Ole Miss probably not going to be great this year. They're in Matt Luke's third year. They did bring in Rich Rodriguez to run the offense and see what he can do. It looks like it's going to be Matt Corral at quarterback, the fiery guy who got in to that Egg Bowl fight last year, started throwing punches in there. They still have Scotty Phillips at running back, really talented running back for them. Could be one of the better running backs in the SEC. But, man, they lost everything at receiver. A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, and DeMarcus Lodge all gone. So a lot of turnover there at receiver. It's hard to imagine their receiving core is even half as good as it was last year. So not a recipe for success necessarily with that much turnover at receiver and with a new quarterback. No more Jordan Ta'amu back there. And losing a lot of experience on the offensive line, too. Only 2 starters returning there. And, man, their defense was abysmal in 2018. But they are returning pretty much their entire defense. So I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, but I guess experience can't hurt you. So they are returning a lot on defense as well as bringing in a new defense coordinator in Mike McIntyre. So hopefully he can right the ship there. And they've got a lot of JUCO talent coming in as well. They recruited a lot of JUCO players on defense that they're hoping can come in and help revamp this depleted defense. So not expecting a lot from Ole Miss this year. This game is at home for Auburn. It is coming right after that road game at LSU. So they could be a little bit beat up going into this one against the Land Sharks, but it's hard to see Auburn struggling in this one. Auburn is just so much more talented top to bottom, has a lot more experience. I think Auburn wins this one by at least 2 touchdowns. Like I said, hard to see them struggling in this one. Ole Miss does have a bye before this game and New Mexico State the week after, so this game is kind of placed perfectly for them. But it's just hard to see any scenario in which Ole Miss comes out on top. Zach, you see any sort of struggling here for Auburn against Ole Miss?
No, I don't have any big expectations for Ole Miss in 2019. I'm not even sure they're up to a full scholarship, full 85 scholarships yet. After all the sanctions they went through with the Hugh Freeze stuff, and their defense is not going to turn around fast enough to make a huge difference this year.
No, yeah. I mean, it's hard to see them even taking a step forward from what wasn't a great year last year. I believe they went 5-7 last year, and it's, to me, looking at this team, it seems like that's their ceiling this year. I don't see them getting to 6 wins. I mean, it's possible, I guess, but I mean, you've got to put a lot of wins on the schedule there that they're just not going to win. So it's going to be another tough year for Ole Miss fans, but maybe they'll get that thing turned around eventually. Who knows?
It's going to be a while. It'll be like turning around the Titanic.
I agree. Yeah, and I don't know if you've watched the movie Titanic or you know what happened with Titanic. But, it didn't end well for him.
Nope. Matt Luke might run that thing into an iceberg.
He just might. I feel bad for the guy. He seems like a nice guy, but rough times ahead for Ole Miss fans, I'm afraid. All right, Zach, let's get into some truth or trash here. We got a few things to get into, and then we'll get out of here. But, Zach, what you got for us, truth or trash?
All right, truth or trash, Auburn breaks the streak and wins in Baton Rouge in 2019 for the first time in 20 years.
Listen, man, it's hard to believe it's been 20 years since they have won in Baton Rouge. You would think they're due at this point for a win. I mean, it's been such a long time. I mean, it still hurts that 2017 game. They were up 20 points or something like that, and LSU came back and beat them. But man, it's hard to see them winning this one too. I mean, we just talked about how good LSU is, and it's on the road in Baton Rouge. It's just it's such a tough place to play, especially when LSU is as talented as they are this year. I don't know, man. I'm gonna say trash. As much as I hate to say it, I've got to say trash.
My brain says trash, but this is where Auburn wins usually. Whenever you don't expect it, so I'm gonna say truth. We'll come back to this later.
Wow, so an interesting turn of events there. Zach going with Auburn and me not going with Auburn. Yeah, we'll definitely have to come back to that one after that game finally goes down. But, man, LSU's just so darn good. It's so hard for me to picture a way for them to win this game. I mean, you never know. I mean, LSU could drop one to Texas early and then just kind of fall off the tracks after that, and Auburn could hit a hot streak and find a way to win in LSU. But just regardless of what happens in their season, unless catastrophic injuries occur, it's hard to see any scenario where this game isn't competitive. So, all right, yeah. What else you got for us in Truth or Trash?
All right, Truth or Trash, toughest schedule Alabama has had in a long time is the one that coming up in 2020. Just for reference, that includes USC to open the season in Arlington, and a trip to or Georgia coming to Tuscaloosa in week 3. Not to mention the changes that have been made to the November part of the schedule with LSU, Texas A&M before the Iron Bowl, and then, of course, rounding out the season with Auburn at Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, I'm going to go truth on this one. You got a little upset at me when we were texting about this, and I said that it was going to be Alabama's toughest schedule that they've had in a while. But to me, it just is fact just about. I mean, you're going to have USC, and so next year JT Daniels will be a third-year starter. He'll be very experienced. USC not where you would expect them to be right now, but I feel like next year they're going to have a pretty decent team, better than most of the team, better than Duke and better than Louisville for sure. And then you got Georgia coming to town. Obviously, Georgia is in a great state right now. You got Kirby Smart running things. They're obviously going to have a great team next year. So, I think definitely truth. It's definitely the toughest schedule they've had in a while.
I guess it depends on how you define a long time. I think in 2017, right up to the day of the game, you would have thought Alabama's schedule was pretty good with what was billed as the best opening football game in college football history, with Alabama and Florida State playing 1 and 2. Of course, Florida State quarterback gets hurt. They don't end up being very good. And then you go back to 2015 when they had almost the identical schedule they do next year. They played Georgia, and then they played Wisconsin and Arlington, which I think would be comparable, if not. But I think Wisconsin was a better team that year than what you would expect from USC next year. So, like I said before, I think schedules are overblown anyway. We're talking about like a one-game difference from year to year, from what people will call that's a good schedule to that's a terrible schedule. Only real difference next year is they're playing Georgia, and this year they're not. And the preseason, the opening game is a Power 5 team that people don't traditionally think of as being terrible at football. So I don't think it's a huge difference from 19 to 20. Obviously, getting a name brand team in the kickoff game is definitely preferable. And I think I've mentioned this too before. Alabama's not picking those games, and if they were picking the ACC opponent for that game, they would definitely not be picking Duke.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a huge difference, but to me it's a significant one. Getting a good team in week 1 with USC or week 2, whatever it is, and then you get Georgia out of the East. I mean, that's all I'm saying. It's a step up in the early week with your out-of-conference game, and then it's a big step up with the team you draw out of the East. So I think with those two things combined, it's the toughest schedule they've had in quite some time.
Yeah, maybe three or 4 years. Yeah.
Yeah, 3 or 4 years is fair. After you get back further than that, it might change a little bit. But all right, what other truth or trash do you have? You got any more for us?
Truth or trash? Auburn's schedule is more favorable in this new setup in 2020 than it is now.
Yeah, so in this new schedule in 2020, they will have LSU the week before Alabama instead of Georgia. Greg Sankey in the SEC headquarters just laughing in Auburn's face. I don't know who Auburn pissed off in Birmingham at the SEC headquarters, but obviously they made somebody mad because they wanted Georgia away from that Alabama game late in the season, and so they got their wish there, but then LSU comes in right before Alabama and the Iron Bowl. So I'm going to go trash, not more favorable. And yeah, that's what I'm going. I'm going with trash.
I would say, yeah, probably trash. I don't think it's any less favorable. At least you have that game moved away, and LSU and Alabama are rotating home and away instead of home, and away. Every other year. So you don't have to play 2 straight road games in November anymore against SEC West opponents. But you lose the FCS game in between. So, I mean, it is what it is. You got to play the same teams. I don't think it really makes a huge difference what order it is.
That's something that Gus Malzahn talked about in his press conference today, is that they asked him about the change. They asked him about the change, and he said that, as long as Alabama's doing the same thing, they're playing Texas A&M the week before the Iron Bowl, that's about even, so it's okay with him. So he didn't have a whole lot of a reaction there to it, but he seemed okay with it as long as Alabama was drawing an SEC West opponent as well.
And Saban was asked about this as well, and guess how that went, Clay?
Probably not very well.
What your reaction to the schedule released today for 2020? That you have Texas A&M now at the end of the season before Auburn instead of earlier in the season. How do you?
I haven't even looked at the 2020 schedule. We play Duke. Don't we play Duke in 3 weeks or whatever? I don't have any reaction to the schedule. We work hard to try to have the best schedule we can have. It's our goal to try to get 2 Power 5 teams to play. You guys act like we pick who we play. We don't pick who we play. We have to get somebody to play, and that's what we try to do. So I can't even tell you who we play, so I can't respond to something I haven't even looked at.
About how I would expect.
So asking Saban something about 3 weeks from now, you're going to get an answer like that, much less you ask him something about a year from now. I think he's probably of the same mindset. Like, you're going to play the same teams. It doesn't really matter where you put them. I think some people might prefer to have the bigger games late, because a lot of times you're playing your best football later in the year than you are at the beginning. I would argue that Auburn under Gus Malzahn has played better later in the year than they have earlier in the year.
Definitely.
In years they've had success. So,
Zach, I got another truth or trash for you.
Okay.
Nick Saban doesn't know who they're playing in 2020. Truth or trash?
Trash.
Yeah, thank you.
And out of all this, I think LSU probably drew the worst out of this. They have no bye week, no FCS team to play in November, and they play Alabama, South Carolina, Auburn, and Texas A&M to end the season. And those last 2 games, we were on the road. So,
that's a brutal November.
Not get the good end of that deal. And I was just thinking today, in 2020, the amount of turnover you're going to see just among those 4 teams, Texas A&M, LSU, Auburn, and Alabama. Auburn will lose most of their defense. Alabama will lose likely their entire receiving corps, their quarterback, a couple offensive linemen, their tackles mainly. That's the biggest thing. 3 or 4 players on defense. Joe Burrow will be gone at LSU, so it'll be a totally different look. And the SEC West won't be decided until the end of November, because those teams don't play each other until then. So it's going to push that way back, and the SEC East will probably be decided by the first of the month. So Georgia's probably be sitting back just waiting to find out how they play.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about the West not being decided until late in the season because of those games being pushed back. So that'll be a new little added twist to things. But you mentioned LSU having a pretty brutal November, but Auburn and Alabama's are both pretty brutal too. Auburn's isn't quite as bad because they have Arkansas, LSU, and Alabama. That's pretty manageable. They got UMass thrown in there as well. But Alabama's, they have at LSU, and then they have Texas A&M and Auburn to close out the season. So those are some tough Novembers thrown in there. I mean, the late season games are very, very difficult for the SEC West now. So that'll be a new added twist in 2020 and something to watch and see how it goes. I mean, you don't really know how that's going to play out. So that'll be fun to watch next year.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be a lot different. You're so used to seeing Alabama and Texas A&M early in the year. A lot of hot football games between those two teams, and then you're used to seeing LSU Auburn around that same time. So seeing those games in November will be a little weird, but I think it's kind of neat to switch things up and just change things up every once in a while.
I don't like change, Zach. Let's just keep it the same. Change scares me.
Now, I will say, you look at if Alabama had this same schedule in 2017, I don't think they make it. I don't think they make it out of this regular season with one loss. If injuries start piling up on you next year, you're in trouble when it comes to November.
Yeah, that's another thing is by the time November comes around, everybody's so beat up. You just never know. It's kind of almost luck of the draw. You lose whether you're losing good players or kind of middle of the pack players. So, I mean, there could be some big names missing late in the season in those games that are deciding the West. So, gonna be different for sure.
Yeah, with all the changes, schedule-wise, player-wise, there's going to be a lot to talk about going into 2020.
Yeah, can't wait for that. But we still got a full season ahead of us before we get there. So we're going to keep talking about 2019. We'll get to 2020 when it gets here. But 2019 college football season is almost here. Only a few more games to preview before we are at Auburn and Oregon. And Alabama's kickoff against Duke as well. So we're getting excited. We're getting a little antsy. It's almost here. But that does it for now. Thanks for listening. As always, be sure to vote in our poll. Follow us on Twitter at Iron Bowl Hour. Check us out on there. We got a poll going right now about Auburn's new logo, which we didn't even talk about. So check out the new logo on our Twitter page and vote in our poll whether you like it or not. Thanks for listening. As always, we will catch you next week. Until next time.